Imagine two aliens, journalist aliens in fact, touring the Milky Way in search of leads for their new documentary series, Untold Mysteries of the Virgo Supercluster. Having had no luck at the uneventful and frankly muggy Kepler-69c, they are eager to find a planet with more drama. At an interstellar gas station, they hear about a planet with a species that has managed to heat up their climate so much that it may soon make it uninhabitable. Suddenly animated at the sound of the word uninhabitable, one journalist alien says to the other, "That sounds interesting. A tragic tale of self-destruction, a battle for survival against all odds. I think we may have found our lead." Okay, now imagine you and I are at the pub and these aliens walk in, right? They order 2 gin and tonics and a packet of salted peanuts and come and sit up at the bar with us. We start chatting, they tell us about their documentary and how they want an Earthling's perspective on climate change. What happened? What have humans done to address the issue? How do we feel humanity has handled the whole thing? What would you say to them? Do you think we've acted diligently and expeditiously? At the first sound of an alarm, banded together a global community prepared to spare no resources in pursuit of a sustainable future? No, I didn't think so. I know what I'd tell them. I'd say despite 40 years of warnings from the scientific community, humanity has made no dent whatsoever in the rising carbon curve. 17 of the 18 hottest years on record have occurred since 2001. Increasing temperatures have led to severe droughts and agricultural losses throughout the world. Ocean acidity has increased 26%, already bleaching coral and damaging ecosystems. There are now 4 times as many natural disasters like storms and floods than there were in the 1980s. Arctic sea ice is declining at a rate of 13% per decade, while melting permafrost releases even more GHGs into the atmosphere, accelerating global warming. Increases in atmospheric CO2 concentrations have led to reductions in the nutrient content of major food crops, already leading to nutrient deficiencies in many parts of the world. Island and coastal communities have already started moving away from sinking homelands and uninhabitable nations. Meanwhile, the international community's current pledges are predicted to result in 2.6 to 3.2 degrees of warming, approximately double the 1.5 degrees experts have argued should be the upper threshold. Now, the journalist aliens might recoil slightly at my overzealous response, perhaps choking on an undermasticated peanut. Nevertheless, I'm sure they'd appreciate my contribution. After all, I invented them, and this is my hypothetical scenario. Imagining is what my keystone is all about, which is one reason I wanted us to have a drink at the pub with these aliens. It's useful when thinking about problems to be able to step outside of them, assume a vantage point from which one can survey the scene as a whole. To be able to do this with global issues like climate change, aliens are crucial. After all, what is outside Earth but the extraterrestrial? By doing so, we are able to see the wood for the trees. We have all the technology and political ideas to be able to live on Earth sustainably, but instead, we choose to keep burning fossil fuels, ignoring decades of warnings from the scientific community. If aliens could see us now, they would be astounded by our incompetence. Another reason our alien interview is useful is because my keystone is in a genre similar in spirit to science fiction. Works of science fiction typically deal with imaginative and futuristic concepts that pertain to themes of science and technology. An interesting strand of sci-fi critique termed critical science fiction views sci-fi scenarios through the lens of critical theory and the philosophy of science. In a similar vein, my keystone focuses a critical lens onto works of design that speculate on potential climate futures and alternate climate realities, the purpose of which is to engage communities in debates about potential futures, where the aim isn't to predict the future, but to generate futures that can be used as catalysts for research and debate. This methodology is called speculative design. So enough chit-chat. If you haven't understood anything up until now, that's fine. You'll understand the rules of the game once you start playing. So let's get to it. If you asked me what the most significant and overlooked impact of climate change is, I might say displacement. Most estimates suggest that by 2050, approximately 200 to 250 million people will be displaced from their homes due to the effects of climate change. By the end of the century, there could be over 1 billion. For context, in 2015, the year of the European migrant crisis, there were approximately 65 million displaced peoples of all kinds worldwide. That means that in 30 years, we expect there to be 3 times the number of people that were displaced at the time of the migrant crisis, or 15 times the number of people at the end of the century. Now, the specific drivers of this displacement are varied and complex, and if you want to learn more about them, please read my book Design for Climate Change in the link below. but I'll mention an interesting one here. It is widely acknowledged that a warming climate is going to destabilize food production. However, recent research has revealed that increases in the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is actually decreasing the nutrient content of food crops. That means that as we pump CO2 into the atmosphere, food crops all over the world are becoming less nutritious. Over time, agriculturally dependent economies may be damaged by decreased yields, while their local populations suffer from compounding nutrient deficiencies. This will in turn foster conditions that contribute to cycles of poverty, such as agricultural dependency, infant mortality, stunting, and disease. This is just one example of the things that are predicted to drive displacement throughout the century. Now, the question is, how are we going to respond to this displacement? If you don't know much about the European migrant crisis, I encourage you to read my book to find out how we handled that. Hopefully, it will illuminate that the most overlooked aspect of displacement is what happens to people once they become displaced. In most cases, they try to move to other locations, much like they did during the European migrant crisis. As people are displaced by the effects of climate change and move to neighbouring urban centres, this will, as design theorist Tony Fry says, pose one of the greatest technological and social challenges of the 21st century. So let us speculate on this a moment with one of my designs. What if in the future there were a climate change relocation service like Rise Up Real Estate? Here you can see an advertisement on Facebook designed to target individuals that live in high-risk areas. When people click the link, they are taken to Rise Up's homepage. Here, users can type in their postcode and get an approximate submersion date, a civil unrest risk assessment, or a forest fire, drought, or flood risk assessment. Once a user has found out that their home might be at risk from a changing climate, they can search for a lower risk property, perhaps somewhere remote, far from the coast and with arable land and fresh water. I occasionally exhibit my designs to small audiences, and Rise Up has inspired a number of different viewpoints. For some, Rise Up is plainly dystopian, an eventuality that must be avoided at all costs. Some say Rise Up capitalizes upon people's displacement and offers options to position wealthy people in locations where they are least likely to be able to help others. Rise Up may often be inaccessible to people without enough disposable financial resources for an additional property because their current property, if it is in a high-risk area, might be worthless. This may exacerbate wealth zoning in an eerie way. For example, will poor people work the land of rich people in exchange for food, lodging, and safe refuge? Others argue that despite Rise Up's ethical pitfalls, it's providing a service driven by consumer demand. If the service can facilitate the safe relocation of families, then perhaps it's valuable. If individuals can use Rise Up in advance of crisis events, then perhaps migration patterns can be more evenly managed throughout the century. What do you think? What are the consequences of a service like Rise Up? What world does Rise Up inhabit? So let's look at another overlooked impact of climate change. According to the World Health Organization, air pollution is the world's largest single environmental health risk. As a contributing factor to stroke, heart disease, lung cancer, and respiratory diseases, air pollution is responsible for more deaths per year than alcohol and drug use, and reduces life expectancy more than smoking, accounting for 9% of deaths globally. While older populations are most at risk from diseases associated with air pollution, children are especially vulnerable due to damages caused to their lungs during development that can persist throughout their lives. Besides being a major health risk, pollutants are also an effect of greenhouse gas emissions and a driver of climate change. Most air pollution comes from industry, animal agriculture, and transportation, which along with energy production are also the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases. When fossil fuels are burned, they release a number of compounds besides carbon dioxide, one of which is black carbon, also known as soot. Black carbon particulates can be so tiny that when emitted, they are able to float around in the atmosphere for weeks and travel thousands of kilometers, paying no heed to international borders. Some black carbon particulates can end up in polar regions where they land on white snow. As the black carbon covers the white snow, it reduces the amount of sunlight that is reflected off the snow and increases the amount absorbed, otherwise known as reducing the snow's albedo. Besides further warming the planet, this effect also melts permafrost that releases ancient methane reserves, a potent greenhouse gas that causes more warming. Other black carbon particulates that don't reach the poles are inhaled by humans. When small enough, they are absorbed into the bloodstream through the lungs, where they inflame and constrict blood vessels. This blocks blood flow to the heart and brain, and over time can lead to stroke or heart attack. As previously mentioned, people with pre-existing conditions and the elderly are most at risk from disease, but there are significant health risks associated with exposing children to black carbon that can last throughout their lifetimes. As Naomi Klein recounts in her fantastic book, This Changes Everything, today, children are sent to school in pollution masks decorated to look like cute cartoon characters. This made me think, in futures where we continue to emit more pollution and pollutants become an even greater health risk, how else might we endeavour to protect our children from the air? Geozone is one of my projects that explores this speculative terrain. Geozone is an air-controlled geodesic dome designed to provide a safe play area for children. When levels of air pollution are above safe guidelines, children can play inside the dome to reduce their exposure. While children may be able to play safely indoors, parents may want their kids to play outside like they did when they were young. Parents may have nostalgia for playing outside and want it for their children, or they may simply want some peace and quiet in a crowded house. Geozone is made from transparent panels in order to enhance the feeling of being outdoors and also to allow monitoring from their parents outside the dome. The air quality in and outside Geozone could be monitored by an app on a parent's phone so they can make sure their children are at safe exposure levels. The app could learn when the kids usually play in the dome and automatically purify the air in advance of those times. There are a number of ways the air inside the dome could be purified. Each would depend on the type of pollution, the intensity of the pollution, and the user's preferences. Geozone is fitted with a HEPA filter panel that could purify the air in most cases. However, users could also fill their dome with plants and enhance the natural landscape of the dome while also purifying the air. In certain locations and climate futures, plant life and ecosystems may be compromised, so Geozone may be a rare opportunity for children to experience plant life. How does Geozone make you feel? Does it make you want to go out and buy one? If our alien documentary makers could see kids playing in a Geozone, what would they think? Perhaps they would find it peculiar that humans have already discovered renewable energy and regenerative farming. They have researched the health impacts of air pollution and the effects of climate change on the environment. But in spite of all that knowledge, humans continue to live in airtight boxes designed to protect them from the air they themselves are polluting. Maybe they'd think, neat idea. Let's take one home as a souvenir. Here are just a couple of ideas and designs from my book. If you're interested in thinking more about potential climate futures, then feel free to read Design for Climate Change in the link below. If you're interested in speculative design, it's a hot topic in design scholarship right now, so there's lots to satisfy your curiosity. But a great place to start is Anthony Dunn and Fiona Raby's Speculative Everything. Climate change will alter the world. How exactly it is altered is up to us. There is no single climate future that we are drifting implacably towards, but a universe of futures ripe for exploration. We begin this exploration by asking questions. Nothing is given. Everything is available to inquiry. And perhaps to the dissatisfaction of our extraterrestrial investigators, hopefully I've raised more questions than I have answered.